In the Early Hours was a song that I wrote after a lot of the first Catfish album was recorded. And we're in the long process of overdubbing it and trying to get it right. Which, I was working with Peter Walker in the studio and Dave Blood playing harmonica. And then one night I wrote this song, and I felt immediately that it was a single, that it was a hit. There's something about simplicity and the way the melody when it does the change in the middle of the verse, how the melody kind of soars over the chord change instead of, that seems to kind of lift and take off. And the With You Tonight bit, look at this bloke. So I was very excited when I wrote it, and I had it in my head, how to record it. At that time, a friend of mine, who you would know also, called Colleen Ironside, was touring the James Brown band through Australia. And they were playing in Sydney, and Colleen said, you should come down and bring Danielle. At that stage, I was a single dad with my daughter Danielle, who was she would have been, I guess, 8 years old, something like that. And so, and Colleen said, bring Danielle, I'll put you in the projection box of the Hordern Pavilion. So we watched a whole James Brown band performance from the projection box of the Hordern Pavilion. Myself, my little daughter, Colleen, bringing drinks up and stuff like that. It's very enjoyable. And then we met them afterwards. And I thought at the time, I've got this song. There's this gun band in town that they have nothing to do for a few days. Why don't I see if, I don't know if I suggested it or Colleen did. Why don't you take a couple of them into the studio and do some recording? So that's what we did. And I booked a studio, went in with their bass player, whose name I've forgotten, their guitar player called Ron Laster, who later became a good friend, and their drummer, Tony Cook, who later became a good friend. And the three of them, and also Maceo Parker came down. Maceo was legendary James Brown sax player, and I think for these younger guys in the band who were in a strange situation of going and recording with this kind of unknown white guy in a studio in this far-flung city, Maceo coming down was sort of a comfort thing. I think Colleen invited him down, comfort thing for them. They knew that, this will be okay because Maceo's here. And Maceo sort of took a look at what was going on and listened to the song, and he kind of gave it the cool seal of approval, so that the other guys, Ron and Tony, they could sort of relax and enjoy themselves. So that's how we recorded the song. And might have overdubbed some piano on it. And then I was thinking, with that first Catfish album, I was really ambitious at that stage, fool that I was. And I was really concerned that because a record company had signed me to make solo records, that I should be providing hit radio singles. And that meant to me that I had to go all out and get this radio mixed. And where do you do that? Where do you find the best people in the world to do that? So I took the tapes to New York. And did the thing that you have to do in those days when there were no mobile phones and no computers. You sit in a hotel room and you make calls to personal assistants whose numbers you can get, and you sit by the phone in the hotel room and wait for days for people to call you back, which by and large they don't. Oh, and this is after, mailing out the song, the stuff you want mixed on cassettes, sending it in the mail to people and couriering it and stuff like that. And you just sit by the phone in a hotel room. Because if you go out for a walk, somebody might ring while you're gone. So you have to limit your time outside the hotel. So that's what I was doing when I got a call from Chris Lord-Alge. Now, at that stage, Chris Lord-Alge was the hottest young, him, along with his brother Tom, was the hottest young insider gun record producer on the planet, in New York being the centre of the world. He was a young, extremely brash hotshot. Anybody knows him will tell you the same. Hotshot New Jersey engineer and producer who had just, through having no respect for anybody or anything, had taken, and through producing hits, had taken the recording world in New York by storm. And he rings me up out of the blue. I hadn't sent anything, I barely knew who he was. I wasn't sending tapes to anybody as cool as him. He rings me up out of the blue and says, I heard your stuff. I want to get involved. Do you want to have a cup of coffee? I said, yeah, sure. So we had a cup of coffee and he's saying, I really like your stuff. And I'm thinking, there's got to be some mistake, because this guy's got to understand that there's not a lot of money in me. I don't get it. And I can't really sing. And, I've got this weird collection of songs that don't sound like anything in New York. But he really wanted to work on these songs. And so he booked time, I think at Electric Ladyland Studios, booked all these session musicians that he knew. I still have no idea who they were. Bass players, keyboard players, guitar players, to come in and overdub on these songs. And he did some overdubbing too, because unbeknownst to me, before he was an engineer, he was a drummer. These guys just kept coming through the door, sort of bowing to Chris, like as if he was God, doing amazing things on my songs, and then out the door again 40 minutes later. At one point, after this bass player had come in and done something on one of the songs, I was in the coffee room making a cup of coffee and, making small talk, and I said to him, what have you been doing? And he said, I just come back into New York from Arizona. I've been doing bass overdubs on the new Paul McCartney album. Well, that shut me up. I thought, doesn't Paul McCartney do his own bass? But, so I thought, well, he must be pretty good. And that's the kind of caliber of people that are playing on these songs. Anyway, the songs, including in the early hours, sounded amazing. And then Chris mixed it, and mixed a couple of the other songs on the first Catfish album. And I couldn't stop listening to it. I thought, this is such a radio hit. And so I brought them back to Australia, put it out as a single. I think it was actually a minor hit on the radio. And at some stage, 2 months later, after they stopped playing on the radio, the record company actually distributed it to the shops. But, These things happen, don't they? Timing. Sometimes you have a bit of luck and sometimes you don't.
Echoes off the wall catch my heels where they fall. I've been through this way